Okay, welcome to Communication and Decentralized Organizations. I'm your professor, Dr. English Dowdell. Now, let me start off by asking you something. Have you ever worked on a team where not everyone was in the same place or even in the same time zone? Maybe you've taken a virtual class or an online class like one you're taking now, maybe worked remotely or collaborated on a group project where everything happened through email or Teams or maybe some kind of messaging app. So, if so, you've already experienced a form of decentralized communication. So, today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what that actually means, and more importantly, how communication makes or breaks decentralized organizations. Now, a centralized organization is one where decision making and communication are distributed across multiple individuals, teams, or locations, instead of being controlled from a single central authority. So instead of everything like going through one manager or, say, one office, different teams or individuals have the ability to make decisions and communicate independently. Now, this structure is very common in like remote companies, global organizations, a lot of tech startups, and even project based teams. The key idea here is control is spread out, not centralized. So, in a decentralized organization, you'll typically see a few important characteristics. One is autonomy. Okay, teams and individuals have more independence, in how they work and how they make decisions. Second thing you'll see is distributed teams. People may be working from like different cities or states or even countries. The third is reliance on technology. Because, the people aren't physically together, communication tools, they become essential. And then the fourth is flexibility. Work doesn't always happen at the same time or in the same way for everyone. Now, that sounds great, right? But it also introduces some challenges, and we'll get to that. Now, here's where communication technologies come in. And honestly, they're the backbone of decentralized organizations. Think about tools like Microsoft Teams or Slack or Zoom or email or even project tools like Trello or Asana. These platforms, they allow teams to share information, to coordinate tasks, to ask questions, to make decisions, and basically to stay connected without being in that same space. In a decentralized organization, communication doesn't just support work, it is the work. Okay, now let's talk about the reality because this is where things can really fall apart. Decentralized environments, they face challenges like one, communication. Without face-to-face interaction, tone and like intent can be misunderstood. Delayed responses. If people aren't in the same maybe time zone, communication isn't going to always be immediate. Lack of visibility. It can be harder to know who's doing what and where things kind of stand. And then over communication or tool overload. Too many messages, too many platforms, it can get overwhelming. And this is important. Choosing the right communication platform, which we talked about in the last module, becomes even more critical at this time. Okay, so now let me bring this back to you. Some of you might already have experience with decentralized environments, maybe through like remote jobs or group projects using Teams or Slacks, or even taking an online class like this one. And if you haven't, that's okay. This module is about helping you think through what it feels like to work in that kind of environment. What would be different? What would be challenging? So, for your discussion for this module, I want you to reflect on your own experience or imagine one if you haven't had an experience. So, you'll head over to the Teams channel. And then share whatever, whatever, whether you've experienced a decentralized organization or not, explain like how it might have impacted communication and engagement. And then I want you to identify one role communication technology plays in that environment. And then if there are other responses there, if your peers have, placed responses there, I want you to respond to at least one of them and reflect on how their experience changes maybe your perspective. This is where we start communicate or connecting like theory to real world experience. And that's where the learning really is going to happen. Okay, so some takeaways for this module. So I want you to remember decentralization gives flexibility and independence, but without strong communication, it can quickly turn into confusion. So the real question becomes, how do we design communication that actually works when people aren't in the same room? That's what we're exploring in this module.